O tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So I ask permission from Ajahn Naniko and the Sangha to say a few words. Ask permission from the lay people. It's January 21st, I think. 2018. So just listening to the rain. It's very nice. For me, it brings up like a samana sanya, like a perception of being a samana. And I was considering in the meditation today, nothing in particular is happening. It's just sitting and it's raining outside. And it's kind of like nothing in particular is happening. But over time, something is happening. When we do the meditation, do the practice, put in the time. That's not to say that it's guaranteed that something will happen if we sit a certain number of hours. But if we're putting effort into our meditation object, and if we're putting effort into overcoming the hindrances, then I think over time it's almost imperceptible, but things start to become a bit more clear. We're about 2 weeks into the winter retreat period, and I'd say things are going well. It's because of that sense of nothing much happening, nothing in particular going on. Just group practice, sitting and walking meditation, chanting, following the daily schedule. And everybody's been more or less keeping to the noble silence quite well, actually. Sort of better than I've seen it in the past. And I was also kind of wondering about that. And I think it's highlights a certain way that things work, or a certain paradox. Because I feel in this community right now, there's not, even though we keep noble silence during the winter retreat and that's our standard, but there's not a lot of pressure to keep the noble silence. And when there's not a lot of pressure to do something, then we're more likely to do it and succeed. And so there can be some talking if it's necessary. And even if people have a chat here and there, we're very forgiving with them. And so then somehow because of that, we give rise to a desire to keep it. We start to see the benefit of it. And that's important. If we're doing something because we see the benefit of it, that's so much better than doing something because we think we're going to be criticized if we do otherwise, or we think we're going to get admonished or told off. So that's like with the Buddha, he didn't order people around. Sometimes he was strong and firm in talking to his monks if they were breaking their sila, if they were breaking their precepts. He might say, do this, do that. But in general, in the Buddha's teaching, in the Dhamma, then in terms of the Dhamma, he wouldn't say directly, you better do this, you better do that, but he would say, when you do this, there's suffering, and when you do that, there's happiness. And then it's up to you whether you want suffering or happiness. The other day, during one of the discussions after the reading in the morning, Ajahn Naniko was talking a little bit about how Lungpa Liam trains people. And really similar to the Buddha, he wouldn't speak directly to you, but he would say what's proper and improper for a monk or for a samana. But then he would allow you to make your mistakes, and he'd be hanging back, paying attention. And sometime later, at the right moment, he would bring it up in terms of when you do that, suffering arises, or when you do that particular action, you won't feel good about it. And that's all. If it was serious enough, he might say, and don't do it again. Because you're living in the monastery, you keep the agreement of living in the monastery is to keep to the standards of the monastery. But in terms of a general teaching a group, the Buddha or Lumpur Cha, Lungpa Liam, they would say, if you do this or that, then suffering arises. And if you do this or that other thing, wholesome, then happiness arises, and contentment, peace of mind. So, and we choose. So it's like, in terms of 5 hindrances, and also thinking in terms of like nutriment, because when we're doing this group meditation, hindrances come up one by one, sometimes more than one at a time. Sensual desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, drowsiness. 4th being restlessness, and then the 5th hindrance being doubt. For myself, when I start sitting a meditation retreat like this, it's almost like they come up in order. It's almost like the Buddha listed them in that order for a reason. And I've come to expect it. Now, the Buddha was very forgiving with people, so he didn't hold it against anybody if their mind had hindrances. But what the Buddha and what all the Kruba Ajahns are looking for is, are we working with it, or are we just allowing the mind to continue driving in the same direction it's always been driving? Or are we actually going against the stream? That's really what the Kruba Ajahns are looking for. And the Ajahns, the great teachers, not necessarily looking for, are we undertaking some sort of heroic ascetic practice? That may be useful depending on the practice for some people. But what they're really looking for is, are we steadily and consistently working against the hindrances, these 5 hindrances? Sometimes if I'm meditating and my mind gets caught in a hindrance, and it's part of my conditioning from living for a period of a number of years in Thailand, I think, oh no, what if someone here has psychic powers and they can read my mind and they see what's on? I always get nervous around psychic people. But then the reason I love the Ajahns in Thailand is they see beyond that. There's different levels, so somebody might be able to see what you're thinking, whereas a highly developed being, say like Longpo Cha, sees past that, but they can see your kamma and your ability to develop. So they end up being very forgiving and compassionate when we're caught in the hindrances, and they can see, well, are they working with it? Can they get past it? How can we help? That's what's more important. Because everybody's at a different stage of development. So the Buddha prescribed certain practices for different hindrances. For the first hindrance, sensual desire, and this doesn't have to be out and out lust, but it can be desire in terms of connected with any of the sense bases. Desire for beautiful sights, good sounds, desire to be surrounded by beautiful things. And the Buddha talked about it on a more subtle level as being giving inappropriate attention. That's appropriate attention is yoniso manasikara in Pali, and inappropriate attention is ayoniso manasikara. So giving ayoniso manasikara, which is inappropriate attention, to the sign of the beautiful, and this gives rise to an increase in the first hindrance of sensual desire. So when there's inappropriate attention to the sign of the beautiful, the Buddha prescribes meditation on the unbeautiful to bring the mind back into balance. That's the asubha kammatthana, to bring the mind that is obsessed and stuck in a sign of the beautiful. And that's called subha nimitta. So, and just to back up a little bit, when I talk about sign of the beautiful, that's something that it's a mental object like a meditation object. It's a mental object, a mental factor that the mind creates. So, for example, if I see a beautiful sight, my mind isn't actually attached to that object, but it's attached to my sign that I've created, that sign of the beautiful in my mind that I've created based on seeing that object. And the sign is always created based on our tendencies, proclivities, our preferences. You know, say the object that I'm attracted to is never, in reality, never as beautiful as the sign is making it out to be. Sounds are the same. So we're attracted to a certain aspect that our mind clings onto, and we create a sign, and then we give attention to that sign. So giving attention to that sign of the beautiful gives rise to an increase in sensual desire. We use the sign of the unbeautiful to bring it back into balance. And this is many ways we can do this. We can mentally, if we have a visual mind, we can take the body apart, take our own body apart in our mind and look at unattractive aspects of our own body. And this is something which is emphasized specifically in the Thai forest tradition, but also the Buddha put great emphasis on contemplation of the body. We can do that. We can try to see inside of the body, its unbeautiful nature. Or we can contemplate the elements. If our mind either isn't visual or it doesn't easily, it's too repelled by looking inside of our own body, then the elements or death contemplation, and death contemplation for bringing the mind out of this intoxication with the sign of the beautiful, bringing it back into the present so it's not in a state of hoping for something good to come or to arise in the future. Because the first hindrance of sensual desire, that's always something based in the future as well. There's a hope to get something good in the future. So the death contemplation, it reminds us that it's not about getting something good in the future, but it's about coming back to the present moment. That's one way of bringing the mind back into balance. Then there's the second hindrance of ill will. And this, the Buddha said, this hindrance arises from giving inappropriate attention to the sign of the unbeautiful. So it's unbalanced in the other direction. And what that means is maybe I've had a conflict or a difficult interaction with somebody, so the mind chews it over, creates some sort of story around it. That's one way you could think of the sign of the unbeautiful. Gives rise to aversion. Maybe in seeing something unpleasant, seeing a dead animal in the forest or something like that, that can give rise to a sense of revulsion. And if it goes too far in one direction, it gives rise to the inappropriate attention to the sign of the unbeautiful. And the remedy for that, the Buddha called metta kammatthana. So with metta kammatthana, or metta practice, usually it's translated as loving kindness, which, or universal love, which for some people this can be a little bit woolly and kind of a bit vague. In Thai, it's translated it as goodwill or well-wishing. So, starting with oneself, well-wishing for oneself, just wishing oneself well. Because sometimes the sign of the unbeautiful can be like an irritation or an anger towards ourselves, like a guilt complex or a memory of something we're embarrassed about we did in the past, or a sense of we broke a precept, if we're monks, broke a precept, beating ourselves up, castigating ourselves for forgetting to wipe our feet before we went into the Dhamma hall. And so metta for oneself, that's like wishing oneself well. It's all right. Telling oneself it's going to be okay. Just giving oneself credit for the good that one has done. To bring the mind out of that too much focus on the sign of the unbeautiful. Bring it back into balance. It's sloth and torpor, drowsiness. This is something which some people really struggle with. I know I really struggled with it for years, and somehow I've just sort of matured out of it. And I'm not really quite sure. It can be a number of things that sloth and torpor and drowsiness, like specifically mental drowsiness, comes from. Because I can see that there's a difference between physical tiredness and mental drowsiness. Like the body can be quite tired, but the mind can still be bright and alert. So the Buddha gave a number of techniques to Mahamoggallana when Mahamoggallana was striving for arahantship, and he was nodding, and the Buddha, he's probably going without sleep, practicing day and night, and the Buddha appears before him and gives him a number of techniques for overcoming sloth and torpor. And the very first one is to check in and see what is our mind focusing on that's causing us to go into sloth and torpor. And if we can pull the mind out of that particular focus and put it on a different focus, a different meditation object, and to see if that fixes the sloth and torpor. And that's an interesting one, because I could see if I got caught up in nodding during the meditation in the past, or presently, I can see that the mind has slipped off the meditation object, and it's gone into some sort of daydreaming, and that somehow triggers it. The sloth and torpor really comes up strong. And so to bring the mindfulness back, maybe try opening the eyes. Take some deep breaths and refocus on the meditation object, whether it's Buddho or contemplation of the body or metta or whatever. And the Buddha gives another recommendation. If that doesn't work, then giving rise to a perception of light, a light nimitta in the mind, imagining a light. Because sometimes when the mind goes into drowsiness, it gets kind of fuzzy and dark. And so actually perceiving light can be helpful. Other things, he says, pulling on the earlobes, that works really well, actually, if anybody's ever tried that. The ears are very sensitive, so the Buddha saw that, and he said, rub your face, pull on your earlobes. Lungpo Cha said, splash some water on your face. Not while you're sitting here. I wouldn't grab this. Just, maybe you could do that. Get up and do walking meditation. Go outside if it's nighttime, especially when it's cool like this. Go outside, open your eyes, let the cold wind blow on your face, look at the stars. Do some walking meditation. In the end, he says, if nothing works, go ahead and lie down for a little while. Then get up as soon as you've had enough rest, mind is refreshed, and return to the meditation. But whatever we can do to give rise to a sense of energy, inspiration. Another way the Buddha says is like reciting Dhamma. One is thinking about Dhamma, contemplating Dhamma, but then also reciting Dhamma. Fourth hindrance is like a restlessness, agitation. This can come about through, say, if we have broken precepts that can cause agitation in the mind. The whole reason for the precepts is so that when we keep them, the mind becomes less agitated. So one way the mind becomes agitated is by breaking precepts. And one way to overcome that hindrance is by tightening up one's focus on the precepts. But it also just thinks and proliferates about whatever, anything. We can try to steer it towards thinking about Dhamma, but if it just wants to think about random stuff, then the Buddha prescribed just mindfulness of breathing. So coming back to the anapanasati, just to calm the mind, and coming back to the meditation word, Buddho. Take some deep breaths, get back in touch with the body in the present. So restlessness. Doubt. Doubt is uncertainty about the teachings, uncertainty about Buddha Dhamma Sangha, uncertainty about our own ability to make progress in the practice, uncertainty about what's right and wrong, what's wholesome and unwholesome, uncertainty about the causes of happiness and suffering. So one is giving rise to faith, Buddha Nusati. That's we can think about the life of the Buddha, think about the suttas, read more suttas, read biographies of great teachers in all traditions, great teachers of the past. Anything we doubt, any point we doubt, go to the suttas, look it up, study about it, look it up in the heart, look it up in our own mind. Whatever we have doubt about. And if we can't verify the truth of something, just to be able to have that quality of suspending judgment and just giving it time. Buddha Nusati, recollection, the Buddha, inspiration connected with the Buddha. It's really good for overcoming doubt, I think. It can also be doubt about the teachings, karma, rebirth. Maybe there is only this one life. Maybe when we die, we really are annihilated, so doubt can arise that way. Maybe the Christians are right. Maybe the Muslims are right. Maybe all this Buddhism is just a big conspiracy theory. So through the practice, trying to have a truth discernment faculty, very important for anybody who's a Dhamma practitioner. How to discern something that's true in the practice or in the teachings, and how to separate that out, how to distill that from that which is misleading us, misguiding. One thing that people would go and see these wanderers of other tenets during the time of the Buddha, who had various views. There were 7 main ones. And most of those teachers would start off by saying, only this is true, everything else is false. So that's like if we hear something like that, or if we read something like that, that should set our alarm bells off. Whether it's a Buddhist teacher or anything. If it's only this is true, everything else is false. If you think otherwise, well, you're stupid. So we shy away from that. Not sure about that. But then when you read something in the teachings or you hear somebody, this is saying, this is how I see it. Try it out for yourself. I could be wrong, but go ahead, try it. This is the result I got from that. So, come and see, ehipassiko, the Buddha is saying, come and see, try it out. This practice is for the complete ending of suffering. Then that truth discerning awareness, sort of okay, well, they're not calling me stupid for not believing it. They're not, forcing me to do this. Maybe there's something to do it. Maybe there's something to it. They're not going around recruiting people to be part of their following or whatever. So maybe there's something to it. So then we follow a trail like that. We follow a trail of teachings that say, come and see, come and see, come and see. Could be wrong, but try it out. So there's these 4 protective meditations that come into overcoming the 5 hindrances. And that's the contemplation of the unbeautiful, to bring the mind out of the sign of the beautiful, or inappropriate attention to the sign of the beautiful. That's the asubha kammatthana. Then there's the metta kammatthana, to extract the mind, rebalance the mind from being too caught in the sign of the unbeautiful. So that's asubha kammatthana, metta kammatthana. Marananusati, that's the death contemplation. Bring us back into the present. Buddha Nusati, inspiring the contemplation of the Buddha's life. Who is the Buddha? What is the Buddha? The Buddha within as well. The real Buddha, the present moment Buddha. So Buddha Nusati for overcoming doubt. Asubha Kamatana, Metta Kamatana, Marananusati, Buddha Nusati. Those are what's called the Anurakana Kamatana, or the 4 protective meditations. The Buddha taught that anybody who cultivates all 4 of these is protected on all sides. So it's not that we just use one, like, what's your practice? Oh, I do metta. But it's just, we have a toolkit of these different meditations, and we develop them, hone them over time, become adept at using these tools. We can apply it at any time, whether we're meditating or not. But we can be mindful of where our attention is going, how we're using our attention, and then apply the proper tool appropriately. Specifically during this time of winter retreat, this is a great opportunity for developing our skill and ability in using these different tools that the Buddha gave us. So that's about all I have. Longpa Pasano will be back. Longpa Pasano, Ajahn Kurunadamo, Ajahn Kasapo, Tankachana. They'll be back in 5 days, 6 days. So looking forward to their return, and wish everyone well in their practice. I'll leave it at that.
Sadhu, 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 Padmaram.
Closing chant.